Hi, this is Paul Turley for Dun & Bradstreet and SolidQ. I'm going to show you how to use the D&B Company Match service with Power Query in Excel to update customer and business records. So I have a list of customer leads that were obtained from an exhibit show where our company exhibited, and I have about 50 leads. And I know that some of the information that we obtained is either inaccurate and we have some missing information. And I want to make sure that when we reach out to these leads that our salesperson has accurate information and has a very high degree of confidence that the information that they're using is correct. So I can filter some of that here. I can certainly manipulate it in Excel, but we're going to use Power Query. And then we're also going to use Power Pivot to further work with this data, and then we'll create a leads report. So I'm switching over to the Microsoft Azure Marketplace here in my browser. This is at datamarket.azure.com, and if I click on the Data tab and go down to See All Providers or Publishers, you'll see that D&B is listed as a publisher of data services, and I can subscribe to various services. You see the business verification service. We're going to use the D&B Cleanse and Match service. So once I've subscribed to that, which is a very simple thing to do using my Windows account, I go to the Power Query tab in Excel and just click the indicate that I want to use Microsoft Azure Marketplace as a data source. That opens this navigator pane, and any of the services that I've subscribed to will show up in this navigator pane. So I can expand business verification, and there you see the company match by name and address function. You see the FX, which indicates that that's a function rather than a data feed. And that means that I have to pass some parameters to it, and then it returns a table of rows of information, or a table of information. So when we edit that, you can see that this opens up my query editor, and I can invoke this function. That means I run the function once. And since there are some required parameters, you see there the name and street address, I'm going to be prompted for these parameters. Now I need to call this once, and I need to pass some company information to it. So I'm just going to look up a McDonald's restaurant in my hometown. And I can look up anything that I want. I just need to call it once so that I can get the script that is used to call this function. So I need to indicate a minimum confidence of 4, and then I click the OK button, and there you can see that it did find a McDonald's restaurant, and there you see the franchise owner. So this is actual data. That's the actual franchise owner of that McDonald's. So you can see that the cleanse and match function did its job. It looked up a company. I'm going to copy this script out of the formula bar to the clipboard, and I'm going to use that for reference. I'm also going to change the name of my query just to simplify it to company match. Now I don't need these results, so I'm going to delete the invoke step, and then I'll click apply and close. Now I do need to click the load button down below, and that's easy to miss. If you skip that, then you end up having to go back and do this again. You can see that it does save this as a query, and that query will be called company match, and that's actually going to become the name of the function that we will call. Now the next thing I'm going to do is get my data from Excel. So I click the From Table button there on the ribbon in the Excel data group, and that's going to load the data from my Excel sheet, and let's call this leads. And I'm going to scroll to the right because I want to add, and let's load this to the data model, which means that we're going to load it into Power Pivot rather than an Excel worksheet. So we'll go to the last column, right click, and choose Insert Custom Column. This is where I actually call my function. So I'm going to give this a name. We'll call it D&B Match, and that's actually going to be the prefix of all of the columns that are added. And I'm going to paste the function call script that I had copied before. Now remember, we renamed the function, so I do need to rename that manually here, and I'm just going to use this as reference. So I type an open parenthesis. You see each of the columns or parameters that I need to pass. So I'm going to pass my fields in the same order just by double-clicking on the available columns, and then I type a comma after each one. So there's the company address, city, state, postal code, my country code, and then the last required, phone, and then I need to pass it, see that number 4 in parentheses, that's my minimum confidence level. That's passed as text, so it needs to be in double quotes. So we'll make sure that all of the required parameters are passed, and if they are, then we'll delete that line that I had pasted, and then click the OK button. You can see that no syntax errors have been reported, so it did validate that I called the function correctly. You see that this custom column shows up as a table, and that requires some explanation. What that means is that all of the columns returned by this function can be added to my table. And I click on this double arrow icon up here, and you see all of the columns returned by my function, and I want all of them. So I'll just leave them all checked, click OK, and that's going to actually add all of those columns. And you see that this returns an error because one of my country codes wasn't recognized, and my error text shows that that was UK. Now I left this in the demonstration so you can see what commonly happens when it doesn't understand what's going on. So what I need to do is I need to remove that last step, and then I'm going to filter out the UK records, and then I'll simply expand the column again, and then I will click OK, and I see all of those columns added to my results. So here we see all of the matched information. So this is accurate information based on a match with a confidence level that tells us what information was in the Dun & Bradstreet database. Remember, that database consists of about 250 million records. And so let's pull the matched company name over and put it next to the company name that we had started with, so we can compare our value to the matched value from Dun & Bradstreet. So if we pull this over to the left side and put it next to company, you'll see some subtle differences between the company and the matched company. So that's the verified company over on the right. And for records that have a high confidence level rating, we know that that's an accurate value. So this makes a good first impression when we contact customers. Now, make sure we click Apply and Close, and that will load this data into the Power Pivot data model. As the data is loading, you can see the progress in the window on the right side. As soon as all of the records are loaded, you can hover over each of these queries, and you'll actually see a peek or a preview of the data. So you can see that it's finishing up. If I continue to hover, then there's my peek window that shows me a preview of the data, and I know that my data's been loaded into the data model. So I'm going to switch over to Power Pivot now so that I can see the results of this data. So I click Manage to open up the Power Pivot Model Designer, and my leads table was the table that I just imported, so let's switch over to the leads table. And there you see both the original columns and the matched columns that were returned from the cleanse and match function. And if we take a look at the confidence level, you'll see that our data was pretty clean. The lowest match confidence level that we have was 6. What I'd like to do is bucket those numbers. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that that was imported as a number. Always make sure that you check the data type for columns that you import into Power Pivot. Now I right-click and I create a column here, and I'm going to call it Match Confidence. And this is a calculated column, so we begin with equals, and I'm going to write two nested if expressions to say if the confidence code equals 10, then that's going to be the word high. Otherwise, if the confidence code, I can just click on this column to get that reference. If the confidence code is less than 6, then that's going to be low. So it's the word low in double quotes. Otherwise, I want to return medium. And I type 2 close parentheses, and that finishes that. So there you can see the match confidence, which will be very easy for whoever's working this leads list to be able to filter the report that they are using in Excel, and just to very simply say, these are records that I know have a very high confidence, and so when I talk to those leads, I can be very confident that I'm talking to the right person, I have the right company name. So let's create a pivot table here in Excel. I'll just give myself a little bit of room for a header. And I also want to add a slicer for that match level. So we'll go down there and just right click on the match confidence, add that as a slicer, and then we can format this and dress it up a little bit. Since we only have 2 values, rather than stack them vertically, I'll format the slicer. I'll put that I don't know, I always move things around a little bit. Put it in 2 columns, and that'll free up a little bit of horizontal space. And we can format that. Then I also want to give this a title, so we'll go ahead and give that a title and then just dress it up a little bit. Let's make this report look a little more attractive just by changing the font size and positioning things the right way. Move the slicer buttons over here. So I usually just reserve an area above the pivot table for my slicers, and then I'll add my fields. Now, when you add fields to a pivot table, by default they're going to be arranged in a drill down hierarchy with levels and subtotals and grand totals. So I'll add all of those fields first. So if I add the company, the DUNS number, the address, let's go ahead and find the phone number, and then all of my contact details that someone would use as they're working this list. Address, city, state, zip code, etc. You can see that those are stacked in drill down order, and then if I just go to design, I can change the report layout to a tabular form which flattens it. Then I can get rid of the grand totals and the subtotals, and then we'll just double click on the separators to resize the columns. And then my last step will be to remove the drill down button. So we'll just right click on the pivot table and go down to the pivot table properties, and then here on the display tab, it's the first checkbox up there. It says show expand collapse buttons. We just uncheck that. We have a nice flat table. So right now I'm looking at my match confidence that's both high and low. We'll click on high, and so now I can work this leads list with a very high degree of confidence that this is accurate information as I reach out to these leads, and then we could work the medium confidence list knowing that maybe there's some question about the accuracy of that information. I think that you'll find that you can get a lot of value from these tools, and I hope that this tutorial has been useful.